Welcome to Sustainably Speaking, a brand new podcast by BDO Luxembourg, where we cut through regulatory noise and focus on what actually matters for your business. I'm Fanny, the lead of Sustainability Advisory Services at BDO Luxembourg.
And I'm Malcolm, the Sustainability Officer here at BDO in Luxembourg. I'm really excited to be kicking this off. Fanny and I talk about this stuff every day, so it felt the right time that we to start recording our conversations. And today we're tackling our favourite four-letter acronym that has probably been keeping importers up at night, CBAM, CBAM.
CBAM, the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, a topic that has moved from something to watch to something to deal with now, and which has officially entered the definitive phase on January 1st this year. So if you import products currently within scope, meaning cement, steel, aluminium, fertilizers, electricity, or hydrogen into the EU, this episode is for you.
But we'll try and keep it relatively simple. European manufacturers already pay a carbon price under the EU emissions trading system. CBAM makes sure that all goods arriving from outside the EU carry a comparable carbon cost. Think of it as levelling the playing field so that production doesn't just migrate to countries with weaker climate rules. What regulators have dubbed carbon leakage. So carbon leakage, as we alluded to, is the risk that companies move production outside the EU to avoid climate-related costs, or that EU products get replaced by cheaper, more carbon-intensive imports from elsewhere. CBAM tries to address this by requiring importers to pay for the embedded carbon emissions in certain types of goods. So imported products face a comparable carbon cost to those produced domestically.
Right. And to be clear, during the transitional phase from October 2023 to the end of 2025, companies only had to report the embedded emissions. So no money changed hands. But that reporting only era is now over.
So from this year onwards, importers need to be registered as authorized CBAM declarants, and you can do that via an online system called the Authorization Management Module, and you should be able to find a link to that via the EU institution websites or via your environmental regulator in your member state. They need verified emissions data, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, from their suppliers, and they'll eventually purchase and surrender CBAM certificates. The first certificates are due by the end of September in 2027, but they cover everything that's been imported over the course of 2026.
Now, one thing that confused a lot of our clients was the omnibus package adopted in late 2025. Malcolm, what did actually change?
Well, there were kind of three big things. The first, which we've already spoken about a little bit, is if you import 50 tons or less of CBAM qualifying goods per year, you're exempt from the main obligations. That by itself takes about 90% of importers off the hook completely, but still ensures that we capture 99% of relevant carbon emissions, the vast majority, obviously. Although it's worth noting that doesn't apply to electricity and hydrogen imports, which, regardless of the quantity involved, are fully subject to the requirements.
And second?
Second, the deadline for your first annual CBAM declaration moved from the end of May to September the 30th, so the end of September. And certificate purchases don't start until February 2027, not January of this year, as was originally planned. So as with most of the regulations affected by Omnibus, there's a bit more breathing room for everyone. And then the third thing is default emission values, which were simplified. Although there's a catch associated with that, those defaults are deliberately conservative. And they will increase by 10% this year, 20% the following year, and 30% the year after that. So relying on those defaults will cost you more over time. The idea being that it incentivizes organizations to really engage with their supply chain and try and get hold of accurate primary emissions data.
Also going even further down the timeline, it's worth noting that the EU has already proposed expanding CBAM scope to about 180 additional downstream steel and aluminium products from 2028 onwards.
So even if you're not directly affected today, you may well be in the fairly near future.
Now, what about the data challenge? That's something that we hear constantly in the world of ESG in general. We thought we'd get some input from our network on this. Viola Moller, Sustainability Advisory Partner at BDO Germany, shares her insights with us. Viola?
Hi, Fanny and Malcolm. Well, from what we see in Germany, the biggest challenge is data. But this is not really a surprise. I mean, importers know they need actual emission figures from their non-EU suppliers, but many suppliers have never calculated installation level emissions before. So what should they do? What's our advice? Well, I think the most important point is that you should start the conversation with your suppliers now. Even if the financial obligations doesn't hit until 2027, time is crucial. It will take time to get your suppliers informed, get them on board, get them to collect the data, and then deliver it to you. So companies that invest in supplier engagement now during that transitional phase will be in a much stronger position in the future. Those that don't will probably scramble.
Viola, thank you. That's incredibly helpful perspective.
Okay, so let's create some actionable insight from everything we've talked about. Here are a few things that affected importers should be looking to get on top of right now. Number one, check whether you're above that 50-ton threshold that we talked about earlier, and that should be fairly straightforward. And if you are, make sure your authorized CBAM declarant application, that's a bit of a mouthful, has been submitted. The recommended deadline is the end of March. We're currently recording this before the end of March. So as far as we're concerned, there's still a few days left. And if you're below that threshold, obviously you're exempt with the new rules introduced by Omnibus.
Number two, very important, engage your non-EU suppliers on actual emission data. Default values are a short-term fallback and not a real strategy. Real data means lower certificate costs and better audit outcomes. This also means that there is a direct financial incentive to invest in your supply chain transparency.
And the third thing, which you're probably not going to want to hear, is budget for it. CBAM certificates are priced based on EU ETS auction prices. So at the moment, they're hovering somewhere between 65 and 75 euros per ton of CO2. So you're going to have to factor that into your procurement forecasting and pricing models looking into the future. And it's worth saying at this point as well that this, and I feel like we say this all the time as sustainability people, this isn't just a compliance exercise. It exists for a reason. And businesses should try to think of it as more of a long-term cost management strategy, if you like. Companies that engage in and treat CBAM as a mechanism to support decarbonization, a catalyst for decarbonization, which tends to go hand in hand with efficiency, rather than just a tax that needs to be absorbed, will come out ahead. Organizations that are proactive from that perspective will gain a benefit in the longer term.
Beautifully put, Malcolm. I would like also to add one more thing. Do not forget the interaction of CBAM with other regulations. CBAM does not exist in a vacuum. It connects with CSRD reporting and your Scope 3 emission disclosures. And a holistic view saves you from duplicating your efforts, ensuring your data serves multiple compliance and strategic objectives in one go. And of course, if any of these feels overwhelming, that's exactly why we are here. BDO Luxembourg can help you with gap assessments, declaring registration support, supplier engagement frameworks, and connecting you with specialists across the BDO network.
And that's us for episode 1 of Sustainably Speaking. If you found that useful, feel free to obviously share it with your colleagues in procurement, finance, or the rest of your sustainability team. Chances are CBAM is already on their radar as it stands.
And keep an eye out for episode 2. We will be diving into how CBAM interacts with CSRD and what double layer of regulation means for your reporting strategy. Until then, stay green.